Welcome into Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. Thank you guys for joining me here again on Conference Championship Sunday. I'm going to be putting out this video in between the AFC and NFC Championship games here this evening to talk about some offensive coordinator candidates for the Pittsburgh Steelers now that they have hired Mike McCarthy to be their next head coach. I did put out a video earlier today, guys, on the defensive coordinator candidates, and honestly, that positional hire is going to be a little bit more important than offensive coordinator. We'll talk about the reasons why here in just a second, but make sure you guys click that subscribe button, and then if you guys want to check out our defensive coordinator of candidates video, make sure you guys check it out. It's over 20 minutes long. I break down 12 defensive coordinator candidates to keep your eye on here as the search for the next DC here in Pittsburgh is underway. But now we can talk about the offensive coordinator here in Pittsburgh. And just keep in mind that McCarthy is likely going to call plays. He has called plays for most of the teams that he has been the head coach of in his NFL career. There was a stint there, a very short stint in Green Bay, and then there was a few year stretch there where he had Kellen Moore as his offensive play caller in Dallas. But for most of the seasons that McCarthy's been a head coach, he has called plays, including at the end of his tenure there with the Dallas Cowboys. So my guess is McCarthy, who is being brought in here in part because of his offensive mind, who has had a top 5 offense in half the seasons he's been a head coach. So that's 9 seasons out of 18 years. He's had a top 5 offense. That's really impressive. And then over 20% of his seasons, so in 4 of his seasons, he's had the number 1 offense in the league according to points per game. So McCarthy's has obviously a big time track record of putting up a lot of points, lighting up the scoreboard, moving the ball down the field, developing quarterbacks. And because of that, I fully expect McCarthy to call the plays. And because of that, this offensive coordinator job is not as attractive as some other jobs that are out there that are offering up opportunities to call plays. So like the real big name, potential offensive coordinator candidates that the Steelers could potentially go grab, the Grant Udinskis of the world, the Jim Bob Cooters of the world, the Joe Bradys of the world, the Nate Shieldhouses of the world, the Brian Dables of the world, the Cliff Kingsburys of the world, the top names that you're seeing thrown out there. Those guys are going to want to call plays. And a lot of those guys don't run, a McCarthy-style offense and wouldn't want to coach under a McCarthy-style offense. So I know there's a lot of people out there that are still, crossing their fingers that we could bring in like a Nate Shieldhouse or somebody like that, but he runs a McVay-style offense, and he's going to want to, A, call plays, and B, run a McVay-style offense, neither of which are provided for him with this offensive coordinator job here in Pittsburgh. But also, some other top OC names like David Webb, or Davis Webb. You got Frank Smith, Josh McCown, Darrell Bevel, Matt Nagy, T. Martin, and really any, top offensive coordinator candidate that you want to throw out there that would want to call plays. I don't see them as a realistic possibility for the Pittsburgh Steelers. More likely, it's going to be somebody that, has had a play calling opportunity in the past that maybe didn't do as well and is looking for another opportunity to be an offensive coordinator, and likely somebody that has worked with Mike McCarthy before. I think that this position is more likely to get a guy that has a track record with Mike McCarthy, that understands the style of offense that he wants to run, and has an established working relationship with McCarthy, and they know exactly what they're getting by being his offensive coordinator. So we'll start our list here with somebody that I think is a pretty top candidate right now for the Steelers when it comes to this position. I think he's really qualified for it, and I think he'd be an awesome fit for it, and it's Alex Van Pelt, who, is the senior offensive assistant to Sean McVay there with the Los Angeles Rams right now. Obviously, the Steelers have been a team, or Art Rooney II has said that he's been enamored with the Sean McVay style of offense and all these different things. And, Alex Van Pelt not only, spent a year in Los Angeles this year with McVay and the Rams, but he's also a Pitt alum. He's a Pittsburgh native. He's worked for McCarthy's for many seasons. He was an offensive coordinator under McCarthy in Green Bay. He's got quite a bit of offensive coordinator experience, not only with McCarthy in Green Bay, but he's also been the former OC of the Browns and the Patriots very recently. So he's been a coordinator in this league as early as, as late as last year with the New England Patriots. He helped develop Drake May in his rookie season. And even though May wasn't as good last year as he was this year with Josh McDaniels, he still played pretty darn well for a rookie. And Van Pelt, got the most out of a young Drake May in an offense that famously had no receiving weapons, no offensive line help. They didn't have much of a run game. And Drake May, under Alex Van Pelt calling the plays there in Gerard Mayo's Patriots team at the time, he looked pretty decent, So I think Alex Van Pelt, I probably wouldn't trust him with a play calling job at this point, but with the fact that he's coming over from the McVay system, I'm sure he's learned a thing or two about offensive football and the McVay scheme and why it works, all those different things. With the fact that he's already got a working relationship with McCarthy, he's got a working relationship with Aaron Rodgers as well as his former OC. So I think bringing in Van Pelt, can bring in that familiarity, that that Pittsburgh mindset. It's another native hire here for the city of Pittsburgh, but also somebody that can maybe bring in some new ideas from the McVay tree that the Steelers have said that they admire. So I think that one makes a lot of sense. But also Luke Getsy is another Pittsburgh native, by the way, that used to work for Mike McCarthy in Green Bay. Makes a lot of sense. He went to the University of Pitt, city native again, worked under McCarthy in Green Bay, worked with Rodgers for many years as his quarterbacks coach with the Packers. And he's another guy that's been the OC in two different spots with the Chicago Bears and Las Vegas Raiders. And with Getsy, those two opportunities that he had, like he had Justin Fields in Chicago, not a great quarterback to work with, and then he had like Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell with the Raiders back in 2024, not great either. So, I think that Getsy, as a Pittsburgh native, is somebody that has that working relationship with Mike McCarthy. If he gets offered the offensive coordinator position here in Pittsburgh, he would accept it, even if it's not a play calling position. So right now, I would probably say Van Pelt and Getsy are probably the two most likely, but some other ones that are possible. Scott Tolzien, who is the quarterbacks coach for New Orleans under Kellen Moore right now. They run a Mike McCarthy adjacent offense there in New Orleans, and Tolzien was the quarterbacks coach for Dak Prescott in Dallas when McCarthy was the head coach there. So Tolzien has helped McCarthy develop Dak Prescott from somebody that early on in his career was really somebody that needed a strong run game to be able to put up some good production, some good numbers. And then during the McCarthy era, Prescott became much more of his own man, where he didn't need a super strong run game to build one of the top offenses in the National Football League, which is exactly what the Cowboys were under Dak Prescott, especially when McCarthy took over play calling duties in 2023, where Dak was the MVP runner-up. He was the second team All-Pro quarterback that season. Definitely the best year of his career. Tolzien helped McCarthy develop Dak into maybe one of the top 10 most intelligent NFL quarterbacks over the last 2 decades. And Dak, even at this point, he still runs a McCarthy adjacent offense with Brian Schottenheimer there in Dallas. And he had another top 10 season this year. He's a bona fide top 10 QB in the game. And by the way, he helped George Pickens become an All-Pro this year there in this Mike McCarthy style offense that they still run in Dallas. So I think Tolzien would be somebody that, I think he, as a former McCarthy employee, he's only a quarterbacks coach right now in New Orleans. He helped develop Tyler Shuck in his first year as well, so that's worth noting as well. I think Tolzien would be an awesome hire for the Pittsburgh Steelers under Mike McCarthy as well. But then another name from the Dallas kind of coaching tree there that worked under McCarthy under Jerry Jones and the Cowboys is Lunda Wells, their tight ends coach. Lunda interviewed for the Commanders' offensive coordinator job there with Dan Quinn. And Lunda is somebody that apparently was really involved with Mike McCarthy and Brian Schottenheimer on a week-to-week basis when it comes to weekly game planning. So Lunda seems to be somebody that's really well respected by Mike McCarthy, and as just the tight ends coach in Dallas right now, would not shock me if he ends up being the next offensive coordinator of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Another name to consider is Tom Arth. He spent a year, an offseason in Mike McCarthy's offense with Aaron Rodgers, by the way. Rodgers has talked extensively about how they went through the Mike McCarthy QB school back in the day in the early years of McCarthy's tenure in Green Bay. And, even though he hasn't coached under McCarthy, he has been somebody that's been in the league a while. He's got an established relationship with Aaron Rodgers. He's got an established relationship with Will Howard. And Arth has been somebody that's, been in the coaching ranks in the NFL for a little bit now, and he's pretty well respected. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if they give Tom Arth a chance to at least interview for the job. And if he knocks Mike McCarthy's socks off, it wouldn't shock me at all if he ends up getting the OC job. But some other names that have worked with McCarthy in the past that could be in consideration here. Ben McAdoo was the offensive coordinator in Green Bay under McCarthy for a long time, and he's currently an assistant to Mike Vrabel in New England, and he's helped develop Drake May in his second year with Josh McDaniels. So Ben McAdoo is somebody that could be considered. Then Edgar Bennett, another former OC in Green Bay, and a longtime McCarthy employee. He's currently the wide receivers coach with the Jaguars under Liam Cohen. A very well-respected guy. I mean, apparently, according to some reports, Jacoby Myers chose to go to the Jacksonville Jaguars over the Pittsburgh Steelers because Edgar Bennett, who was with the Raiders when Jacoby was there in previous years, was in Jacksonville, and Jacoby Myers loves Edgar Bennett. So, that's somebody to consider, especially because he comes from that Liam Cohen, Sean McVay kind of family. And maybe he could bring in some new ideas while still having that relationship with Mike McCarthy. That would be something that interests me. And then one more name that I'll throw in here is Brian Johnson, because Brian Johnson currently works for a former McCarthy employee in Dan Quinn with the Commanders. He's their pass game coordinator. And even though the Commanders did have an opportunity to promote him when they fired Cliff Kingsbury this offseason, they ended up promoting their quarterbacks coach instead, and David Blau. So maybe the Commanders even are not that high on Brian Johnson. But I know for a fact that Omar Khan and Andy Weidel have some connections inside the Eagles building, and Brian Johnson's only other opportunity as an OC was in Philly. So I don't know how the opinions are of people in the Eagles building of Brian Johnson. He only had one season as the OC before he got fired, but he was really young when he got that opportunity. Still a really young guy, and he has been there to help develop Jaden Daniels as quickly as they did coming out of LSU. So Brian Johnson is somebody as a young offensive mind that is respected in the league, that has some connections to the Steelers there that, could be in consideration. But I would say those are probably the 8 right now that, when I go through my research, those are the guys that McCarthy has connections to, or there's some tie to a McCarthy employee, and then B, they're a guy that would accept a non-play calling offensive coordinator job here with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Because like I said, guys, I'm just not expecting any of these big name offensive play callers like Joe Brady or Brian Dable, who's expected to go to the Titans, by the way, if he doesn't get the Buffalo job, or anything like that, or anyone of that caliber that's been a long time play caller in this league. Cliff Kingsbury, don't expect him to come here either. I don't think this is going to be like a huge splash type of decision. I think if they make a splashy move for a coordinator, it's going to be on the defensive side of the ball, because frankly, that position's more important now that we have an offensive head coach here in Pittsburgh. You need somebody to run the defense, especially with the amount of talent we have on that side of the ball. We already have our head coach handling the offense for the most part. It'd be nice to bring in somebody that can bring in some new ideas and all those different things. But right now, I'd say, out of the guys that we discussed today, my preferred choice would probably be Alex Van Pelt. He has recent experience being an offensive coordinator in this league. He's a Pittsburgh native. He's worked for McCarthy before. He's got an established relationship with Aaron Rodgers if he decides to come back. And, the thing that really sells me on Alex Van Pelt is that he's a senior offensive assistant for the Rams. And, if you are enamored by the Rams offense, but you don't want to, make the sweeping changes to the organization that Chris Shula and Nate Scheelhaus probably wanted to instill here in Pittsburgh, getting a guy in Alex Van Pelt that, spent a year tutoring under Sean McVay to give some of those ideas to Mike McCarthy might be a pretty good thing for the dynamic of this offense. So right now, I would say Alex Van Pelt would probably be my preferred choice out of the realistic options for offensive coordinators for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But that's going to be it for today's show, guys. If you guys want to check out my list of defensive coordinator candidates, again, I'm going to put the chip to that one in the top right of today's show so you guys can check out that video. Enjoy the rest of your conference championship Sunday, guys. We'll have more content for you guys in studio tomorrow morning as we look for these offensive and defensive coordinator hires coming down the pike here with Mike McCarthy as the next head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So that's going to be it for me here today, guys. I really do appreciate all of your support. I'll see you guys tomorrow. And until then, here we go, Steelers.